Now, before you scream hypocrite at the screen, hear me out, because I have enacted a strict 4 watches out, 1 watch in, blood out policy. My goal is by the end of this year, 2023, we're about halfway through it, thereabouts, to halve my collection. Right now it's about 30, just over 30 watches, so I want to get that down to around 15. The next year I want to halve it again, and then keep going until 2025. Hopefully I'll just have a very small collection. So let's discuss this Tudor. This is the clickbait title. Are you ready for it? I'm done with Tudor. There we go. I have to have a thumbnail like this, like, there's the thumbnail, click on that. Why always the negative stuff? Who knows? Let's get into it, shall we? Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. I'll start off with the wristwatch check. Yeah, the Panerai Luminor still on the wrist. I know, it's just what I wear most of the time now. I'm sorry, you know. Who would have ever thought me and a Panerai? Eccoci qua, you know, what can I say? On the Riscani Watch Club waterfall strap, this is just the best combination, but also it's what I wore in Florence, so it's just got that sentimental attachment now. But this is no ordinary Tudor, because it highlights some quite profound observations about the brand, but also why, in my opinion, it's going to be one of the most desired Tudors in the coming years. More on that later. And I know what you're going to say. I thought you said you were going to quit collecting watches. Well, I am, but in all fairness, this was a purchase I made before I decided that. This sense of finality has in fact given me a whole new perspective and purpose in this final stage of collecting. And aside from today's Tudor, my final 2 acquisitions will be either a Frédéric Constant Tourbillon, which I will also borrow later this year and review. And if I don't decide to go for it, I want to investigate more high-end independent brands, so there's lots to keep me busy in that particular grail watch hunt. My second final buy will be a Grand Seiko to commemorate a future trip to Japan, and that will be it. But anyway, let's make the first decision. Yeah, I love it, because you open it up and it says, the time has come, and then you've got all the good stuff inside. Just gonna check this. Right, drum roll. I've actually owned this very model before. Well, let's hope it. Oh, there it is. Ah, there it is. The champagne dial. Look at that. The fluted bezel. Classic, classic, classic. With their own kind of half Jubilee, half Oyster-esque two-tone. I will swap this out for a aftermarket Jubilee to get that full date just feeling. So far looking good. A little bit of use on the clasp. I'm just going to check the edges. Let's zoom in. I wanted this to be unpolished. It doesn't look polished. The edges look pretty good. Some scratches there, but that's fine. I knew that. I'm happy with that so far. Obviously, we're going to make sure it works. I'm going to unscrew it here. Give it a wind. It's that ETA winding that is so, it's grainy but familiar, you know. The extra links, which I will not need, but I will keep, and they are screwed links, which is always great. There should be a manual somewhere in here. Yeah, it's at the bottom there. Gives you a breakdown of all the different models and references. That's pretty cool. Hello, old friend. It's nice to have you back. It's nice to have you back. And we're joined by the emergency services of Philadelphia. Wouldn't be the same without it. For those unfamiliar with the Tudor Prince watches over the years, it has its lineage that can be traced all the way back to the very first Tudor Oyster Prince watches, which were time only. So I like that kind of sense of history. And those unfamiliar with the channel, I'm no stranger to Tudor. I've owned 3 different Submariners. I've owned the big block the Tiger chronograph, I've owned prints with the Ranger dial, a predecessor to the current Ranger watches, and I've owned 4 different types of the Day-Date or Date-Day. I can never remember which way it ran. They differentiated it from the Rolex, obviously, by switching it round. These 36mm Prince Date-Days were discontinued here, only being available in the Asian market during this new era of the brand and its continuous shift away from the strictly Rolex-looking designs towards more of its own identity. Post the brand relaunch of 2009, Tudor has seen massive success with the Black Bay range, almost to the point of oversaturation, diving pun partially intended. For me, I went the other way, preferring several triple triangle dial subs before settling on my Tudor reference 79090 in the last 5 years, along with the traditional Mercedes hands and not the snowflake. Packed with the true vintage charms of the Rolex 16800 Submariner-based Oyster case, but with an ETA, triangles and a shield logo aside, they are almost identical in fact. However, having recently serviced 2 Rolex watches, I can't deny that the cost stung a little, especially compared to the low cost of upkeep on these pre-in-house movement Tudors. Any decent independent watchmaker worth their salt can service an ETA no problem, and it tends to be a quicker turnaround. And in many ways I feel it's truer to the more tool roots of the sub and the affordability Hans Wilsdorf originally intended for Tudor to have. Whenever we talk about ETA movements, and myself included, we always use these cliches of workhorse movements. Words like this, right? The reason is because it's all true. I mean, they have a lineage now. They've been going since the middle of last century and they've proven themselves. Aside from the jumbo versions from 1969 that are almost 38mm in diameter, like the reference 7017-0, most Tudor Date-Days have a 36mm case, being almost identical to the most mass-produced Rolex of all time, the Datejust, thus being able to be compatible with many of its components, like the crown, bezels, glass, bracelet, etc. In fact, you might notice I attached my aftermarket Jubilee bracelet to really get that Rolex feel and look. The bracelet is also interchangeable with my two-tone Rolex Bluesy from the pre-ceramic era, if you want to get some of that oyster two-tone flex. My newly reacquired 76213 is the last and greatest generation of Prince Date-Days, before the big Tudor Renaissance, packing a top-grade decorated 2834-2 modified movement. It's the best of ETA minus the COSC certification, but I've always found them to be supremely accurate. I love the snappy quick set on the date and day, especially when you hear it at midnight, if I'm ever awake that late. Something even my first Rolex Day-Date didn't have until I upgraded it from the 18038 to the 18238 with the double quick set. It's the most useful of complications in my opinion, because if you're anything like me and supremely forgetful or self-employed 7 days a week, I always forget what day it is, and I'd forget my own brain if it wasn't attached to me. While on the subject of the Grande Fratello brand everyone loves to hate, it's obvious that you get an almost carbon copy look, hence its nickname, the Vice President. But free of any homage watch contention or guilt, and also without the baggage, the cliched stereotyping, and even, dare I say, the occasional scumbag vibes sometimes attributed to the 5-pointed corona.
You see this watch?
Yeah.
That watch costs more than your car. That's who I am, and you're nothing.
So what do you do when somebody compliments your Tudor and says, oh, nice Rolex? Well, it's happened to me. I just tend to smile and say thank you. Are you going to bother trying to explain, what Tudor is? And oh, actually it's a Tudor. Well, it is kind of a Rolex, but and then it's more complicated if you got vintage Rolex signed pieces, and then it sounds like you're trying to, I don't know, justify some kind of franking. I mean, how do you explain to non-watch people what a Tudor is? And then they'll look at you weird because you've been talking to them 5 minutes and they're like, actually, I'm not even that interested in watches, What do you guys think? The best thing about this watch, in my opinion, is it shares what nobody can deny is one of the most compelling qualities that makes Rolex sports watches just so damn successful. It defines the word versatile, whereas in casual sports attire like an extra on the set of The Sopranos or Gomorrah, but also when suited and booted, like a Wall Street American Psycho. It works with just about anything. The 100-meter water resistance and screw-down crown means it can handle any messy chase with a chainsaw, just as much as shenanigans in a hot tub time machine.
Dude is rocking a cassette player. Leg warmers. I'm sure there's a good explanation for all this. Jerry girl! Excuse me, miss. What color is Michael Jackson?
Black?
For me personally, I adore how, with all my other yellow gold accoutrements and jewellery, it really ties it all together. Like Lebowski's rug really tied his room together. Not to mention, you get all the benefits of the more durable steel, but still the subtle luster and flashes of yellow gold on the fluted bezel, crown, and center links. I certainly don't worry about wearing this as much as my far softer, solid 18-carat presidential Rolex. If you don't want to go two-tone and it's too old-manish for you, even though I think Roger Moore did a great job of pulling it off, and he certainly brought some class to it, R.I.P. Sir Roger.
You're very calm and very cool, and you always are in performance.
Because I'm drunk most of the time.
Is that all it is?
It's a champagne blue, you know, successfully known to anybody with a nice bottle of Dom Perignon.
But like the Datejust and Day-Date, to some extent, there's a vast variety of styles and materials to choose from. Tudor perhaps going one step further with the more tool-tastic versions with smooth bezels and even Ranger-style hands available. They are, however, much rarer. And then of course there's blinged out versions with diamonds on the dial that look like they belong in Vegas. Tudor kept the drilled lug holes in the case, even with this late 2000s or the last generation here. In fact, the previous Day-Dates or Date-Days, it coined the urban gentry phrase a strap monster 5-6 years ago now, because it worked with everything, especially the smoother, more sporty bezel, all stainless steel. It just worked with everything. Is it the perfect watch? No, of course not. The stamped clasp is horribly dated, and the diminutive lume has never been great on these. But somehow it still gives me that feeling that only a handful of watches provoke. It's a reassuring, warm, fuzzy feeling of nostalgic familiarity, like some kind of amniotic comfort blanket. In the same way I want to play Warcraft 2, put Frasier or DS9 on repeat, hear the soundtrack to Half-Life, the exclamation of affirmative from a CNC unit,
Upgrade complete.
and so on. I only get this feeling with my Seiko Flighty, my Rolex Explorer, various Casios, Squale, etc. And more recently with newcomers to the collection like my panerai. I can almost hear the church bells, smell the Florentine streets, and taste the fresh schiacciata. This feeling of profound attachment is the quality I'm now searching for and use to justify those that stay and those that leave my current collection as I scale down over the next few years. As you guys know, I despise looking at watches as an investment. Every time I see somebody talking about, oh, what watches to invest in, is it good investment? They're not watch enthusiasts like us. They're flippers. They're money enthusiasts, right? But I have to say, it would be a mistake not to address value when it comes to this particular piece, especially where we are in this chapter of Tudor's history. Now, I sold my last Tudor 76213 in this exact sunburst champagne with stick marker dial and two-tone configuration to Moya Fine Jewelers in order to put the money towards my Rolex Bluesy sub. When I need to sell a luxury watch safely and quickly, they are my first stop. So along with an extra 9 grand of my own money that I was saving, I traded up to the subby. In the back of my mind, I justified the sale by telling myself I can always buy another from the Japanese or Hong Kong market later, as there was always a steady stream of them popping up on eBay. The rarer transitional sub I wanted just happened to come in, used, so I needed to act quick. But now it's not just discontinued here, over the pond in Europe, but also more recently in Asia too. I fear they will become too expensive to buy in mint condition like this, so I'm glad I pulled the trigger when I did. Now, will they explode in value to the extent my vintage sub has? Who knows? Probably not as fast, as the sub is always so highly desired, and this is more of an acquired taste, but it's definitely gonna go up. Will I never borrow another Tudor again and review it on the channel? Absolutely not. I'm still open to learn and experience and try out any new releases that interest me or interest you guys that you want to see. But as for me, I guess the clickbait thumbnail, if I decide to go for it or not, or the clickbait title of "Done with Tudor," I'm done, you know, here we are. I was a fan of Tudor before it was the hyped up, much beloved, almost watch hipster brand it is now. Now don't get me wrong, like I said in a recent video, when buying your first luxury watch, today Tudor is the kipper's knickers when it comes to value, quality and tasteful design in the under 5K range. A perfectly positioned chess piece as a direct competitor to the old Rolex nemesis Omega, covering Rolex in a rearguard action as it continues its advance in order to compete more with the Holy Trinity level big boys. The newer Cellini with a moon phase, the 1908 even more recently, and display casebacks further prove this point. But call me old-fashioned, I still prefer the older Tudor. New Tudor feels somehow further away from the brand Anglophile Hans Wilsdorf named to honour the royal dynasty during a pivotal moment in British history. Did the old Tudor start to die when he passed away in the 1960s? Let's not forget, in 1969 they rebranded to the Shield logo. Coincidence? Who knows, you tell me. But despite that, I feel the Date-Day still embodies a brand that was a classy, affordable alternative to Rolex, and not the anti-Rolex Rolex it has become, if that makes any sense at all. When the word homage was used with the original definition, not the new bastardized confusion we have today. Before they had a faux Hugo in their advertising, the Madame Gaga drama, before every journalistically compromised watch publication that I refused to follow raved about them, when pre-2009 they didn't even give a hoot. Maybe it's the growing contrarian in me as I get older. Most likely it's just that I simply relate more to the undeniable greater sense of verisimilitude in the Tudor of old. To be completely fair, it's not easy for Tudor either. Do something too different and daring and they risk losing mainstream appeal, or worse, alienating all the purists and not growing as a brand. Whatever they do, there will always be the endless self-appointed so-called experts with too much time on their hands complaining endlessly in hateful, uninformative podcasts, or even a greater waste of time picking it apart in watch forums. Therefore, I doubt my wish for a V-shaped big block, like the mock-ups I shared in previous videos, will ever become a reality. So I can only conclude that the Tudor I unboxed in this video will be the last one I will be buying. Regardless, fingers always crossed for that Canesi-based Monte Carlo update in a 39mm size. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think they're getting right? What do you think they're getting wrong? What would you like to see from Tudor in the future? All of that good stuff in the comments. I love hearing your feedback. I think actually that's the best part making these videos. Don't forget to like these videos as well. Very important indeed, especially if you want to see more free and independent content like this. It's the best way to support the channel. I will catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao. Oh, and onwards and upwards.